Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another edition of Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen. I'm excited to have you guys in here with us today. And as you know from last week, we're going to continue that conversation that we have had on stopping the violence and doing something about the senseless gun shootings that are taking place in our communities. And so I'm excited to be here with you today so that we can continue that conversation. I have with me in the studio the Rob father. Rob, why don't you give a shout out to the people?
What's up, Straight Talk audience? Happy to be here. Happy to see you here.
All right, well, we're here, and those of you who are listening via social media, you'll see me in just a bit. I lost my way in to the studio, but I'll be here in just a quick couple of seconds. We are here. It's starting to seem a little bit like this weather. I don't know what we're going to be doing, Rob. I hope that we are able to continue to have a couple warm days. For those of you who are out there, in case you didn't know, let's like, tag, and share this conversation with other individuals. In case you didn't know, next week will be it's my birthday, Rob. It's my birthday. Hey, Kareem, it's your birthday, and so it's going to be a great date. But there's a lot of things that are happening in our community that I want to make sure you guys are aware of what's happening at the grassroots level in terms of the things that are happening. I got a message, a phone call, and a flyer on this week. I don't know if you're familiar, Rob, with Bridge the Gap.
I've heard of it.
Okay, Bridge the Gap, which is an organization in our community that partners with law enforcement. They actually build relationships between law enforcement and the young people of the community.
Right.
And they do so by, basketball games and mentoring opportunities and things of that nature. Well, this coming weekend on next Sunday, a week from today, actually at 1 p.m., they will be having their Feed the City program.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so they have, when I looked at the flyer, I was like, they're not playing. They're trying to get everybody out here.
Now's the time to do it.
And this is a great time to do it. So they're feeding the community, and their goal is, I think they have enough food to feed like 10,000 people. And I know they started off as a small organization doing some things that are small, but they have really stepped up the game and are doing great things this year. They have, all kind of partners, not just G's Pizza, but they've got Genji's. There's a number of restaurants that are participating in this Feed the Community program, and I'm really excited for their director and coordinator, Ayite Sowa, he and his wonderful wife. And so I want you to make sure that you guys get out there and you get out there and eat your food on next week. On next Sunday at 1 p.m. They will be meeting at the Huntington Park. There you go. Straight me up, Brother Rob. Thank you, sir. They will be meeting at Huntington Park on next week at 1 p.m. Feed the City. Make sure you get out there. What's going on to those who are tuning in? So free food on Bridge the Gap next Sunday at 1 p.m. They have all kind of food vendors that are bringing out and feeding the community. Has always been a great opportunity. And the law enforcement officers will be there to feed and to hand out. They've asked me to be a part of that program. I'm going to see if I'm available because, I got church on Sunday, Rob. So 1 o'clock is cutting it close. I'm getting my last. And I'm just joking. But it is a great time. Also, this coming week, we have and I'm trying to pull up this. I have an email from our mayor, Mayor Brenda Moore. She will be having a special meeting for the city of Saginaw. And to discuss some of the issues, the violence and things of that nature that are taking place. And I want to make sure that we have all of that information. You guys are aware of what's taking place. It is going to be a great opportunity. It's going to be at Pastor Larry Campbell's church, I believe, tomorrow at 6 p.m. And they're going to be, I know all of the pastors are planning to be there. She sent an invitation to a number of the civic officials in our community. And, I talked with her about the situation. She says, Kareem, this is something that they're dealing with all across America. I understand that. So as the mayor, I understand that she has a responsibility to do what she can in her authority and her power. But this is really a community-wide issue. And I'm going to continue to trump the horn until somebody decides to do something different or in conjunction with about this. So I want you guys to tune in, listen into what's going to be happening with that. I'm sure there's going to be a number of things coming out. Like, as I said, the pastors of the city have been getting together and they have been meeting on a regular. It's called SAAP, Saginaw African American Pastors. It was a group that started during the course of 2020, not because of the pandemic, but because of the social cry for justice. And they've been doing things, Rob, from, talking with employers about their employment and how they hire. They've been advocating in educational institutions about what they need to, do in order to get more African Americans involved in their higher education institutions. I know that they've been meeting and they've also planned some things that are going to be taking place on the street. So it's important for us to make sure that we're listening on how we can get involved. One thing that I've learned is probably one of the bad things that came out of 2020, Rob, is that people are paying attention, but not many people are listening. So we're hearing a lot of stuff, but we're not really listening to what's going on. And what has truly taken place is, as I've driven by this morning, I went by so many churches that are just not having church. And I've said this before, if you become to a point that, that you're no longer moving, that you no longer have a heartbeat for the community, that you're no longer meeting a need in the community, you become obsolete. You become a dinosaur in that community. Irrelevant. And I've seen so many people, so many churches, and it's the craziest thing in the world. I think it's one of the most different ages that I've ever been a part of as a young man, seeing on Sunday morning churches that are not opening for service. And it's not like they were open Saturday for service. They're just no longer open. And as we transition to this internet world, some of them made the transition, others of them haven't. And some of them made the transition. I don't think they're ever going to come back, Rob. So it's going to be interesting to see how people mobilize. One thing that I know is true is that there is definitely a need for us to get involved with what's happening in our community. There's definitely a need for us to wake up, to say something, and to do something about it. As a matter of fact, this past Thursday, we're going to be out there again. I told my church, listen, I don't feel comfortable being in a church, walking around talking about what the blessings of God want to do and what we have the power to do, and we don't use our power or exercise our power to effectuate change in our community. So last Thursday, Rob, we were on the bridge with it. We were on Court Street Bridge, walking inside, with our signs, and we were praying and, just driving the fact that we think that change needs to take place. And we'll be on the Genesee Street Bridge this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. And it'll start out just by us being on a bridge, but I think that people have to begin to see themselves take action. And when you take a small step, it empowers you and it motivates you to do something more. And so it's important for us to make sure we're doing these things. We have to be seen in our community. We have to be saying that we don't appreciate what's going on. We have to stand up. We have to cry and cry loud. Jeffrey Bulls, the decadent veil has fallen. None of these entities truly represent the people, and they're being exposed. Jeff, I will agree with you to some degree, but I believe that the institution of the church will never fall. Because there are some of us who are out there who understand who we are. There are some of us who understand that our role was not to be the Moses or the deliverer for all people. One plants, one waters, God gives the increase. If you ever want to get in and begin to ruffle my feathers, is when we begin to think that we can live without the church. And we've begun to do that. And we've also seen the pervasive amount of violence and craziness and all these other things. Because one thing was true, Jeff, and I'll tell you this, and this began at home, and it was something that was not the church, the leadership institutions. I understand what you're saying. Thanks for correcting me. But these are the things. One thing that the church was really good for, if for many of the other issues that we may have with the church, is that the church, as I knew it growing up, my grandfather was a church pastor, was the pastor of a church. So I was raised in the church my entire life. Now I ran and did my own thing for a long time. But what I loved about growing up around the church is that it gave me a sense of identity in terms of understanding that I was created on purpose. And I think that a lot of people fail to recognize and to realize, especially a lot of young people that are growing up without the institution of the church and people who really desire to effectuate change in the community, is that they miss out on that process of having an identity. And I'm not talking about identity politics. You're trying to be like, I'm talking about, I realized that I was raised and I was created on purpose. There's a scripture that says something, and I was fearfully and wonderfully made, that I am his workmanship. And it gives us the understanding that someone cared greater for us, that they were willing and they desired to bring us into life. And for someone who may never have fit into society, or someone who has never felt like they belong, or someone who had poor relationships with mom and dad growing up, or, Rob, you've had some situations in your life as it relates to foster care and growing up. I think if nothing more, it gives you a sense that you were brought here, you were created with a purpose that may be greater than the pain that you may be experiencing in the moment. Rob, what are you saying?
No, I agree. I grew up in different foster homes from age 4 to age 18. So I agree. Every one of them wanted to lean onto the church as a supportive mechanism and as a guidance for us. I got away from the church as I got older, but I can't dispute the fact that it has its purpose in the community and its effectiveness in the community. And history itself has shown that it has. I don't know if we can attribute that people not going to church as a result of. Let me back up. I can't say that we can say the rise of violence is because people are not longer in the church. But again, as you mentioned earlier, church needs to be, or people who are in the leadership positions, not just church, but any leadership position, should be in a role where they can be seen and show that they're active. Now, granted, COVID has done a lot to push everybody inside, so you don't see as much as you used to. Maybe people are not being honest about being vaccinated, that sort of thing. So people are in fear. But then again, if your faith is as strong as you say it is, you do what you need to do, and you go out there and you do what you need to do to show leadership and set an example.
You said it better than I could. I've said it a million times, Rob. But I say that, and I need you all to understand this. If there's a system that continually pushes, this is who you are, and that system removes, I'll say a perfect example. People have issues with community centers. A lot of the issues with community centers were how they were run, because we had people that were ill prepared or inept to running those types of centers. When I look at First World Community Center, Sheila Braddock, now Michelle McGovern, she's my dear friend, not Michelle McGovern, but anyways, Michelle, you know who you are, that runs the First World Community Center. She's going to kill me for doing this. And I'm still not fully, but anyways, they understand, and they understand how the business of a community center operates. They understand how building community,
especially now that we have young people whose attention span is that of a night, and I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Michelle McGregor. I had to get it out while I was there. Go ahead.
And with everything attracting the attention of our young people there, you got to keep their attention focused. At yesterday's Saginaw African Cultural Festival.
Tell us about that, Rob.
I was happy to MC that, and kudos to Ralph Martin.
Wait a minute. Did you all catch that? I was happy to MC that. Rob had an opportunity to MC.
I wasn't supposed to MC the whole thing, but there I was doing my thing, and it was an honor, privilege, and what have you. But during the break, I went to see the McNair chess team, and I watched those young kids, actually do their thing playing chess with, and I showed them a few tips and what have you. But it was awesome that they had something for the kids to do, because a lot of kids are not interested in what the performances were happening, but they were doing their own thing, and they were well behaved. I didn't hear anybody screaming and hollering, running over the place, whatnot. They were busy. Their minds were occupied. So, again, we have to give something to the kids to do, because their attention span is like that of a gnat.
Man, one thing that I've learned, and I hope those of you who are listening or will hear this in its rerun potential, is that our children really, we have more issues where our children are not being challenged to really produce in the manner that they can. I'll tell you, Rob, with that month that I spent with those middle and high school students, working with them on STEM-related projects and doing project builds, and bringing them to a place where they began to ideate about solar power. How can we use solar power to change our community? And the ideas that they came up with. Mm-hmm. I said, you know what? We're not challenging our young people enough. We've gotten to a place that we're trying to talk about. We do a lot of conversation about disparities. And Yvonne Daniels, I want to thank you for throwing out there. She was like, Michelle McGregor and I went to Michigan State together. That is my sister from another mother. And I could not remember her name, but thank you so very much. What I saw, Rob, is we spend so much time trying to talk about the disparities, and they exist. Don't get me wrong. Right. And not, making a child feel bad for not knowing the answer, and, not doing. Listen, it's funny because the mayor, she said something at one of our events. We've become so accustomed to talking in terms of everyone's a winner. And the reality of it, when you go to a track field, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. Right. And she said something as a judge at this last pitch competition that we had. She says, well, there's going to be a first place winner and there's going to be some folks who lose. And it was so crazy. I was like, you don't say that. But the reality of the situation is we spend so much time patting our kids and not wanting them to get bumps and screws. But you got to realize that in life, sometimes you're going to lose, and sometimes there's only going to be one winner. And if you're the second place, or the third place winner, it's not the same. I'm sorry. You know, it's kind of funny that we're talking about this. It's easy to make a mistake, a child boredom from them not being able to learn. Absolutely. And they were like, we want to give trophies and awards to all of the kids because we don't want someone to feel bad because they didn't come in first place. And I said, you're preparing kids for what world? What alternate universe are we preparing these young people for? Because there's going to be a clear definition that certain things have happened in life and you're going to win at certain things. And when you don't win, I think is the key that we have to teach children how to accept defeat.
Right. A
lot of the things that we see happening on the playground that play out into these crazy situations in the street is that child has never lost it. You're going to lose sometimes. You know, when you playing ball and somebody may have a better game than you do on the pickup court, then guess what? You're going to lose. So when you lose, how are you going to respond? You're going to get mad and get violent and want to fight. But we have come to this place that we pacify our young people, but we don't challenge them the way that we should.
And sometimes we don't say no to them, you know.
Man, come on. Those are, life lessons that we've learned. But I think that is very important. You're right, Yvonne. We have to continually challenge the minds of our young people. And I saw that, and it made me begin to think, are we really doing everything that we can as it relates to preparing our young people if we aren't willing to really challenge them and put them to task on the things that they're going to be confronted with in this world? All right, so we talked about that. We talked about let's get out there, let's make a statement in the community. Now, this is the other thing. And Rob, I don't know if you saw that. There were a number of state representatives and senators that were voting on the voting rights bills.
Right.
That were being passed. The Republican House is basically trying to say, we take you back to Jim Crow and beyond days, and they're really tampering with access to voting, the hours of voting, where you can vote, how you can vote.
Right.
Let's give them, you got to have 12 pieces of identification. I'm exaggerating, but they're really trying to do everything that they can really to stifle the vote, to really suppress the vote. And so there was, this loophole that many of those representatives, especially from the Democratic Party, did where they left the state. Well, if we leave the state, we can't be forced to come in and vote.
That's down in Texas.
Yeah. So now a month and a half later, they're returning back home and there are actually warrants out for their arrest. And the Republican caucus wants to arrest them because they left the state and were not able to vote and did not vote in this last thing. And they said they would do everything that they can to pass these voting rights laws. Now, I'm saying this for a purpose. That's what's in the news. What I am saying to our community and those who are listening here today, we've got to be willing to be a little Malcolm X-ish about how we operate by any means necessary. That's exactly what I'm saying. They're willing to deter, to destroy, to deflect, to suppress the votes by any means necessary. And we are yet playing on an even political field. We want to be equal. We want to be, and that's why I told you, my boy, Mr. Manchin, Joy Manchin in West Virginia, they need to take this brother and show him what it looks like when you walk off a cliff by yourself. And they need to begin to really push and say, listen, we can no longer have you playing chicken in the middle of the road, because really what you are is that you're a liberal Republican. And he's never been in a position where he's been pushed in the manner that he is. Now, I'll tell you, I've already seen the 2024 Trump for president signs. One sign said, have you had enough BS? And y'all know what BS is. Have you ever had enough BS? Let's reelect President Trump 2024. Make America great again. If y'all don't understand and you don't see the handwriting on the wall, many of you all are going to miss the boat and find out the number, what did I call them, 45 is going to be number 47 if we don't stop playing these games. I think it's time for us to stand up. We got one of the bills in by a consensus between Republicans. It was truly what's the term, bipartisan vote.
Right.
Then we forced the other one through. We are at the goal line. We are at fourth call. For those of you who are athletes, We're on goal line and 4, 1 in goal line, excuse me. And we got to get the ball into the end zone. And so that means you got to do a quarterback sneak. We have to force that thing right down their throat.
We need to do it soon because 2022 is right around the corner.
And everything is going to be about the election.
Exactly.
So it's important for us to make sure that we do these things. We got to get out there. Stop allowing ourselves to be caressed into all these other things. What matters most in your and I communities is that we make sure that we protect these voting rights bills, that there is a federal bill, a national mandate for voting rights that takes place, since all of these state governments are doing such a great job of taking away those voter issues. Okay, last thing for what's on my mind, Rob, is how do you all feel? I need to know how you all are feeling about taking cruises. I saw one of the first, I think it was a Carnival cruise, the very first cruise that has launched since the pandemic. You know, they're ready to get back on the seas. And going out, I guess they said that they had taken roles and everyone was vaccinated that was on the ship, staff and crew and alike. But in terms of returning to port, everyone tested positive for COVID. So this is why I don't trust when I go when I go to the mall, or I don't know what I go to the mall for, but when I go to the grocery store and we're out there, Rob, I'm wearing my mask because there is no way in the world that I'm going to put my life in someone else's hands. And I know, people are lying about it.
Of course they are.
I went and I made a habit actually of starting to carry my vaccination cards. And I said, because we're going to get to a place, and there's a lot of places that are mandating them. New York and California. If you're going to go to a restaurant, you're going to have to show proof of vaccination.
I have no problem with that.
It's crazy because it's almost like something from a science fiction movie, Rob. But this is where we're going. I want to know, are you all feeling comfortable? Okay, I know y'all back on these planes like it's nobody's business. I had a contingency of my family that went out to Las Vegas, and I was excited. I really wanted to go. I saw my aunt in town today. She's been flying all through the pandemic. I just cannot wrap my mind on sitting in a tin can. I think of it like a toothpaste can tube and hurling through the air at 500 whatever miles per hour, locked in with these people who are breathing the same air. I don't know. I just get a little freaked out about it. Maybe it's just me. I'm not there yet. I'm definitely cruisers equal super spreader vessels. Jeff, I agree with you. He said that cruisers equal super spreader vessels. That's how I feel about them. And I can't imagine being locked underneath the deck of a cruise ship with all of this stuff going on. And I have to trust that people are being honest about their vaccination status. Well, this cruise ship came back, went out negative and came back positive with numbers of people that were positive for this. So I don't understand what's going on, but it's going to be interesting to see how this plays. Does this continue? This Delta variant, folks, is absolutely real. And I just want you all to really just be prayerful and thoughtful about how you guys are moving and how you're operating. I've had so many friends of mine that are in their early, mid, and late 40s, some of them just crossing the bridge, that have been in the hospital over the past 3 weeks with this Delta variant. Some of them almost not making it. My girl, Olga Jones, I'm giving you a major shout out. That's my sister. I absolutely love you. You were fighting for your life. And I can't wait to hear your story and your testimony. She is now out of the hospital because I know she knows everybody in the city of Saginaw, Rob. And she was on a ventilator and she wasn't doing well and her breathing was not stabilized. But she is now home and she's doing well. And they posted it on social media. That's why I'm sharing out. HIPAA laws are real. But they posted that she's at home, she's recovering, she's doing well. But this has hit so many people. I mean, even my family, I have a whole entire portion of my family that was hit all at once. Father, wife, kids, with this Delta variant who was not hit the last time. And you think maybe it's not so bad. They're saying this new thing is really attacking. It's making people sicker. They're getting sicker faster, and they're also younger. So we have a whole hospital field that are being filled with people who are a lot younger than what this thing actually started out hitting. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to continue our conversation about stopping the nonsensical violence that's taking place in the city of Saginaw. Y'all stick and stay with us real quick, and we're going to continue this conversation with more Straight Talk.
You're listening to Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen on KISS 107.1.
Summer happens at Speedway because everything you need for summer happens at Speedway. Like drinks. Drinks happen. The freshly brewed drink, the splashed over ice drink, the wake you up drink, the cool you off drink, the make your brain hurt for a minute drink. All poured however you want them, whenever you want them, all summer long. So on every hot day, you have something cold to sip. Speedway. Summer happens here. And now, get any size fountain or Speedy Freeze for just 99 cents. Excludes maximum.
Save big money with 11% off everything now at Menards, your home improvement store. The 6-inch new construction recessed housing makes installing recessed lights safe and simple. It features airtight construction with built-in push-in connectors for easy wiring. All Lithonia lighting, utility, recessed housings, and trims are 11% off now at Menards. Good through August 21st. Savings are mail-in rebate. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Save big money at Menards.
Woodley Leadership Academy is now enrolling for the 2021 school year. We are proud to offer a safe and nurturing learning environment for your child. In-person seats are available for all grade levels, kindergarten through 8th grade. Check us out and schedule a VIP tour at woodleyacademy.org or call 989-717-4390. Enroll now at Woodley Leadership Academy.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 smart bed senses and automatically adjusts to keep you both effortlessly comfortable. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. Don't miss our weekend special. Save 50% on the new Sleep Number 360 limited edition smart bed. Plus special financing. Ends Monday. Special financing subject to credit approval. Minimum monthly payments required. See store for details.
It's Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen on KISS 107.1.
Hey, we're here with more Straight Talk. Thank you guys for tuning in. Those of you who are just joining us, we want to say, hey, you can catch us every single Sunday at 6 p.m. Right here at KissWTLZ.com. That's 107.1 FM. There are a number of ways that you can listen to us. You can go right to our radio station at KissWTLZ.com. And when you go in, you can say, hey, listen now. And when you click that button on the website, it will play whatever's live on the radio. So if I'm on and it's between 6 and 7 p.m., you can hit the button and you'll hear this show in its entirety cast right from your smartphone, your smart device, your computer, whatever. Or you can also go there and you can listen to previous shows and they'll show you where you can go and listen to previous shows that are on the radio. So we're excited to have you here, or check us out on social media at Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen and also at KISS 107.1 FM. WTLZ are the callators to make sure that you got this particular KISS, because there are other KISSes across the nation. All right, so thank you for tuning in on today. We're going to continue our conversation. And I was just really kind of taken aback with Jeff on the other side of he put in the chat stream that when we talk about super spread, he called cruises super spreaded vessels, event vessels. And I just thought that was hilarious. Shout out to my man, Jeff. But let's get into our conversation right now. We've been talking about gun violence, and I want you guys to know this is a very urgent, a complex, and a multifaceted problem that we're working with here. And we're going to talk about some of the antecedents, the things that precede gun violence, secession that need to take place in our community. So I want you all, as you begin to have, or you get involved with this conversation with me on today, I want you to think about what role, what way can you begin to effectuate change? Where can you step in and add some additional support, some leverage? How can each member of our community be involved? What roles can you take? Let's not look at what someone else needs to do, but let's begin to look, what role can I take to be a part of the solution so that we don't continue this issue going on in the world, all right? In our world. So one of the antecedents of gun violence are the developmental issues. And today I'd hope to have one of our head doctors. I call them head doctors. We know most doctors deal with all parts of the body. Some deal with the head. When I say a head doctor, I mean one who is supposed to tap into our emotions, our thoughts, our well-being. And so it's not a bad thing. I use that as my personal for reference for those who do therapeutic healing, because healing and therapy, even though we may have heart issues, they start with the head. So we've got to get our head right so that we can work through these problems. And one of the issues is developmental issues. It's a complex and a variable constellation of risk and protective factors that makes more or less likely to use firearms. And one of those things is when we look at the statistics of those people who are most likely to use a firearm to harm someone or to commit a crime, Why is it majoritively men? The majority of those individuals are men. It's pervasive. I mean, very far out there. There's more men that create violent crimes with guns than there are women. However, that same question, when we begin to take a look at this, you'd have to ask yourself, well, if the majority of people who commit murders are male, then why aren't the majority of men who are male committing these very acts? And so it's important for us to begin to look at those societal factors, because these are very consistent and powerful predicators on future violence when we begin to study how these things play out, given a history of violent nature. Now, Rob, I want to ask you a question because I was listening to you on the show before with Joyce. Shout out to Joyce Harvin, Community Connection. She comes on before I do. She's from 5 to 6 p.m. She had a great show about benefits. Go back and listen to that conversation she had on today. Rob was in there, and I heard you helping out with talking about how you can get your disability. There's so many people there that don't get disabilities. I wanted to say that at the top of the hour. So go back and watch Joyce's show, as I told you could, on WTLZ. And I think it'll be out in the next couple of days, because those of you who are prior military, previous, however you left, if you were disabled in that process, there's something for you to know. But Rob,
you may not necessarily be disabled. You may have some kind of injury. May not qualify as disabled, but you still are entitled to certain benefits. As a soldier or or airman or sailor, what have you.
And I was going to say free benefits, Rob, but you paid for them, so they really aren't free. But they're
they're free to us. In a way, because taxpayers are paying them, and with me working, I'm also paying into my own benefits factor. Recently, Congress, under the Trump administration, has now made us pay for TRICARE. The TRICARE used to be free for my retirement. Now I have to pay $12 a month towards that, and then if depending on my disability level or a person's disability.
Rob, that's good. I want them to go to the website for that conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm just adding those to that though, so that if you're on a disability level, you can either have no co-payment or a co-pay that you have to pay for certain medications that you have, is what I want to add.
Okay. What I need you here for today is, when we look at, most of the time when we look at individuals who are violent, and this is not all the time, but there are kind of a number of people who have been history of mental illness, history of things going on. And then we see a lot of people who are hurting that are prior military.
That's right.
We've seen a lot, especially with this insurrection thing. A lot of people who were, formerly military are still coping, yet dealing with some issues. And we find that many of them, if not really dealt with, if not cared for, if not listened to, find themselves in violent behavior. When I was doing some research, it was one of the areas that they said that we really need to give some greater attention. Now, I want, from your perspective, as we look at violence with handguns and guns in our community, what say you concerning this as a prior military? I'm interested in your opinion.
Well, not everybody that goes to the military suffers from what we know as PTSD, post-traumatic distress syndrome. But there are those who have, I don't want to use the word fetish or kink, and there's tough on that particular thing of when you're in the military. I got to shoot weapons.
A fascination.
There
we go. Thank you.
Hey, it could be.
We have just come out of the muddy waters, back on the playing field. All right, go ahead.
It could be a fascination with that sort of thing. Personally, I don't appreciate veterans who would go against their government with any insurrection whatsoever. Politics differ, whatever. That's not their place. And if it was up to me, and I think the government is making steps towards this particular area, causing those particular veterans they found guilty to lose their benefits, because it's not right for them to go against that. It's one thing to express your freedom of speech, but a whole other thing to do an insurrection or to commit treason. In a way, you're still bound to the U.S. Constitution, to your constitutional oath of protecting and defending.
Okay, because what I'm thinking is I look at what people are exposed to over a period of time, and I'll tell you, I've seen movies and little excerpts, documentaries about violence, and I don't understand how anybody could come out of some of these wars and not be physically changed by the things that they have seen. We get the edited version, filtered for TV, made for TV versions of what take place in these wars when we send our young men and women off. But when they come back, from what I've seen, and I've talked with my brother who's career military, shout out to officer or lieutenant sergeant, whatever, staff sergeant, whatever you are, Richard Walker. That's so sad. I don't know what my brother is, but he gave a life of dedication. My uncle Paul, lifelong dedication. So many have gone in. And it would only, I think that it changes you in a way when you see violence up close and personal.
We see violence and death. When I was in the Persian Gulf War, I served on a ship where SEAL team members would come back with dead bodies. And because I was in telecommunications, I got to see some of these photos and whatnot. And we kept those bodies on our ship in the freezer section storage. We even had a Marine when I was on the ship who shot himself, committed suicide. So there's counseling. The ship will offer counseling, but there's only so much counseling you can give to a person out at sea or on shore. So the government has to take care of that for the soldier.
So the reason I talked about us being at war, because I think that's something that people can relate to, Rob. I think that the idea of people being shipped off to war and coming back and things being different is something that people can wrap their heads around. It makes sense. And so we can understand this situation. However, what I do understand, what I don't think people understand, let me say it this way, is that there are wars that are going on in our community streets.
Yes.
I was looking and just kind of taking a look at a number of things, and I was talking about the 80s and 90s. We went through that whole thing. We've talked about it, that no anti-gun, drop the gun. They went through a gun buyback program, all of those things. Some of our young people are being conditioned by society. And Jeff, you said it, in society, males are taught to suppress their feelings. This manifests later in bad ways. Absolutely. So we're taught the men don't cry, those types of things. But what I also see is that in our communities, there is like gun violence is associated with a confluence of individual, family risks, social behavior, peer pressures, community pressures, social cultural risk, all of these other things. And in our community, because we have young people who are seeing violence, maybe not to the degree, but in the same manner that we're seeing in wars. There was a shooting that took place, and I can't remember what street, right around the corner from the neighborhood. And because I knew the family who this young man was related to, I got a phone call as soon as they got the phone call. And when I got to the location where this was, it had started getting dark. You know, that'll make me know, never mind. So we went out there, and then the body was just laying there. So kids that were playing, the young man was playing basketball, I guess, in the middle of the street, how to, set up the hoops. He was playing basketball, and someone came up and he got shot while he was playing basketball. Now, this is something that was horrific, that was life-ending. It was a fatality that took place in the eyes of his peers, of other kids. And I just sat there and I just began to how do you wrap your mind around this kind of nonsensical violence? Then, before the barriers and things were set up, all of the kids were going over and seeing this kid who's, his body parts and blood were all over the pavement of this driveway. And I was just here thinking, like, this is next world. It's crazy. It was like I was watching a movie. And so I thought about how that's one particular instance. But now we're having these instances, Rob, where, really young people are knowing a person that is being killed by the hands of another young person every single week. And I think about the sustained impact that understanding and seeing and being exposed to violence has to have on the individual over the course of time. And then I begin to look at this. So we are being desensitized to some of the most heinous forms of crime that we could ever be exposed to. And our young people, and this is, our young people are seeing this. These young, impressionable minds are seeing this over time. So they're growing up with a fear that at any moment, my brains could be blown out. Another young man was down here. I guess he's here from the city of Saginaw, was murdered in the city of Flint this past weekend. Our young people are understanding, and I'm not just talking about the ones that were in the street before. It was like, you had to be somewhere or with the wrong people for something to happen. Now we're seeing these things manifest and take place, even with, quote unquote, and I hate to use this term, the good kids. But I wonder how we as a community are going to begin to deal with this. Yes, we need counseling, but we need counseling on a mass level. What are you going to say, Rob?
I hate to say this, and I never thought I would say it as an adult, but I've watched the games that the kids play nowadays. I think art is imitating life, and life is imitating art. And the parents are not guiding their children to realize that there's a value to human life. If you can just look at a body or see body parts blowing up in a cartoon form or in a cinematic form, then you have no guidance. And I said, well, this could happen. What happens in real life? And so you're not sensitive to it at all. I would be sensitive to that sort of thing if that happened. But other people, if you do that constantly and repeatedly, you lose the sensitivity about the whole thing. You lose the importance of the human life. So it just becomes second nature to you.
You know what? One of our listeners, Rob, said the same thing. They said, just as we have the mob, we look at one of my favorite movies is The Godfather. Mm-hmm. And I go back and I got it on DVD now. First it was on VHS tapes. Now we've transitioned to DVDs and Blu-ray, and I have it on Blu-ray and DVD. And I can watch The Godfather literally for days.
But you're old enough to do that.
But what I'm saying is, what you're saying is, see, they were talking about how these pictures and these images, they've become so normalized, and we actually, we what's the term? We memorialize these types of figures and entities in our minds. And so now we have The Godfather, a few good, Goodfellas, all of these things. And we look at that period of time very differently. And if we are now seeing violence in our communities be normalized in such a way, then the person who pulls the trigger really does have, quote unquote, and this is a play on words, the juice. And so now, and I hope that we're not memorializing, that we're not, building up these individuals who do this and like, oh, they the man. And we're really looking at like, no, you're destroying our community. No, this individual is a fool. No, and so I'm hoping that our young people, because they are young, impressionable minds, they sometimes struggle with what the reality of a situation is.
They have a discernment issue. They're not taught how to discern certain things, what's right, what's wrong, and what's gross and grotesque versus what's beautiful. They're not taught that everything becomes normal for them. And that's sad, because that's where our community is going. That's why you see 12-year-old kids or 7-year-old kids who pick up a gun and fire at somebody. I'll give it a second thought. Then we go back with the bleeding hearts and say, well, we shouldn't throw that person in jail because he hasn't been counseled. Well, go back to how did he get the gun or she get the gun in the first place? Why did that person attack that girl who was jumping rope, whatever it was at one time, and disobey the police officer there because they were not sensitive to the whole issue to begin with.
Absolutely. So that's one reason. The other reason, and I kind of talked about that a little bit, is when we begin to bring in the concept of masculinity. We talked about how many more men use guns. Why aren't more men of the population using guns in that population, since we're such a large predicator for the use of gun violence? And when we look at that, Rob, I think about something that we often hear of, but we don't talk about it in our communities. Black communities and Hispanic communities are notorious for not dealing with certain issues in our community that other communities talk about. And I use this term, it's called toxic masculinity. And have you heard that term before?
Yes, I have.
All right. So we've heard that term, toxic masculinity. And we understood it because most often when we hear that terminology, we hear that in terms of domestic violence. We hear that in terms of the type of personality of someone who may do wrong to women. But the reality of it is toxic masculinity is something that governs our airwaves. It's what's on the radio. It's on TV. A lot of the way that men are portrayed, and I believe Jeff out there said that men aren't given an opportunity to cry. They're taught that men don't cry. If you cry, you're a girl. And so what that does is it creates an understanding of what it means to be masculine or be a man. And it begins to create within that framework of that definition, an understanding that all of these negative things are now attributed to your masculinity. You can't let anybody say anything to you and get away. You got to deal with it now because you're a man. You can't go out there crying. You cry, then you're a girl and nobody's going to respect you. And we get all these, you can't let your woman talk to you this. So toxic masculinity now becomes the pervasive form of masculinity that we see in our communities. Other than someone stepping in and saying, listen, all men cry, real men cry, real men should cry. You're cleansing the soul. We don't have those conversations very often with young men. And in Hispanic communities, they call it machismo. It's that I'm a tough guy. What I think that we need to begin to do is we need to get back to those community conversations. I mean, where we had a place, and that's what was happening at these rec centers. This is what were happening at the community centers that were now closed. People came up with the idea that there was not a need for community centers because there weren't kids in the community centers. But the reality of it is the fact that there weren't kids in the community centers was really an indicator that we needed community centers.
Right.
Because these children were being lured into other things. other than places where people were really feeding and giving them some very basic strengths in terms of living and governing their lives.
But you need men in those community centers as well.
Absolutely.
You need mentors to guide them. You need female mentors to guide the women. You need male mentors to guide the young boys.
So as we look at this, and Jeff, I posted your comment on there. It is very important. But as we look at this, we've got to begin to deal with sexuality, sexual identity, masculinity. What do these words mean? And it's going to require that as a community we come together. And when I say community, I mean all of the stakeholders in the community. Yes, the church cannot just talk about praising Jesus. We now have to talk about sex and sexuality and sexual identity and what these things mean. Yes, school, because they're pushing everything over into school territory. Kids are talking about they're coming home and they're learning about the birds and the bees. And I thought that you learned that at home first. That those are things that you learn in the privacy of your home. And then if you were in a school, sexual education or sexual relevancy was all a part, teaching an individual what is going on with their body. I always struggled with having teachers teach that stuff because I think it opens up a level of intimacy to some kids that some adults are not really the safest people to have that conversation around. And I know it sounds bad, and I'm not trying to say that the school is filled with a bunch of perverse people. That's not what I'm saying.
No. But
I'm saying that, and it's in the church as well. I mean, we have to protect our kids as often as we can because these behaviors and these systems do exist. So let's make sure that we're doing that. We're having these conversations. But then we also want to talk about prevention at individual levels. All right. When we talk about preventing gun violence at an individual level, it's important for us to recognize that people are suffering from mental illness. Rob, I think that one of the key indicators and key factors of what's taking place is that we've had people locked up like hamsters for a year and a half. And the threat, the very severe, serious, real threat that we're currently facing, for those of you who are listening, I don't know if you guys have been listening to what the CDC and the World Health Organization are saying. But on last Thursday, our president said, because many of the medical leaders in our country said that it's almost impossible that we're not going to experience lockdowns because of how rampant this variant is. We have exploited this variant to such a degree that what ravished India, who doesn't have as many vaccines that we do, it ravished India because it got out of hand. We are now exponentially beyond the level that impacted India. Now, the great thing is that we do have hundreds of millions of people that are vaccinated, but that's also the bad thing as well. So when we look at this, Rob, I don't think mentally, emotionally, we as a people will be able to sustain. And I heard a lot of people talking about, them going crazy because now they're locked up and locked away, but you're here. But we always pass over what the real issues are. And I think that we really should have been looking coming out of this pandemic or coming out of this hibernation or locked away period, Rob, at getting people involved in a conversation about mental health. I think that there should have been a stronger push for people to talk about, wait a minute, how are you? There's one of my Facebook social media, he's a friend of mine all the way around. He'll check in on me on a regular basis. And every now and then he'll just take in and say, hey, how are you? Like, no, how are you? And I'll say, I'm fine. He's like, no, how are you? And I know that he means on a deeper level. How are you mentally? How are you coping with things? You're dealing with a lot, Pastor. How are you dealing, with what you got going on there? But how are you dealing as a man and as an individual? What are you going to say, Rob?
No, I agree with you. It's, the typical question or answer is I'm doing fine. But if a person is digging into it and shows sincerity, that's a good thing.
So we've got to begin to lean in. And, we are long past the days. And I talk about the family table on so many occasions, because I think that's one of the things we talked about religion earlier. And we were saying that we can't necessarily pinpoint that. But if you look at the dynamics of the whole thing together, we look at a dying sense of the importance or the value of the church institution. And when I talk about that, many times we talk about the church, we talk about a building, and I rarely reference the church as a building. There are a lot of church buildings around the place, but I'm talking about the people. growing up as a young man, the church were those people who came over and saw if my grandfather, my grandmother are well. When my grandfather took ill, the church people were the ones who came over and prayed and talked with him. They were the ones who made meals and brought people over. So I don't look at the church as a building. I look at it as a community of people, which is what the word of God instructs. So we look at the disabling or the dysfunctioning of folks who have the compassionate heart. Compassion is love in action. We don't see love in action from that particular section. Now we're moving into a space that we have young people who are not being engaged at the family table. Now, some of you may say that this doesn't have anything to do with it, but when you put these factors together and you begin to look at the total impact of what's taking place, the dynamics of the family table, and Rob, even growing up in a foster care unit, I'm interested in understanding your perspective of this, because I think sometimes when people think foster families, they think that you were shuffled all over the place, nobody cared, and you were, hanging in the closet or on the,
there are some families like that,
and there are, and it's a real thing for a lot of people. But when I think about the dynamics of the family table and what we are now missing, when I came home from school, my mom cooked every single day. Y'all try to figure out, why was I so svelte and in shape and so thin growing up? And it was because my mother cooked every single meal. And my stepdad, my dad did not, he couldn't eat, he had high blood pressure. So he couldn't have salt. So we didn't eat any salt. We didn't have any fried food. Like the only time I got fried chicken was if I went to my grandmother's house and my grandmother had cooked fried chicken. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the things the kids are being fed are all of these, but I don't know. I call them shell foods, things that can last 100 years because they're so full of preservatives. The Twinkie was that thing, but now that same lifespan that the Twinkie had are in everything. They're, and that's why McDonald's fries have their color. I'm like, I can't get my fries. I mean, just different things that they're doing now that our food is no longer the same. And so now the table conversation where mom would make the meal, we would sit at the table. And, dad, if he was at home, he was there. He would come sit at the table. Grandma, we had extended family. So I might have my grandmother and 5 or 6 of my aunts and uncles all sitting at the table. But we ate together. Whenever we ate, if I ate at home, I had my grandmother's house or at one of my aunts, we always had this thing where we sat at the table and we ate together. And if you had a good day, you wanted to, because you were going to celebrate it. You couldn't wait till they talked about how good the report card was, because everybody was going to sit at the table. And they were going to, justify your attempts at doing great. And they're going to praise you for those things. And in like manner, if you got in trouble and you got the teacher called home that day,
that was brought up at the table.
It was brought up at the family table. What was going on in our lives, we discussed on a regular basis at the family table. And I don't understand, and I don't think we understand that was not just a piece of culture that faded away, but that was really a piece of how we identified. That was a piece of how we connected with each other. It showed us, how to share information and just how family was there and leaned in. Your experience, Rob, I know that it may be different growing up in areas, but I know that you've had some passionate moments with those family members and those families that had brought you in and made you a part of their own.
Out of the 4 foster homes I grew up in, my first foster home that did not do that. My second foster home, it was long-term. They did that. There was just my brother and myself, and then my foster mother and her husband, and we sit at the table unless he was working late for some reason. Then the third foster home, they didn't do that at all. And then the last foster home, which was long-term, with my foster mother passing, that was a requirement. We did that. And she had one rule. She said, Saturday is your day. We don't do it on Saturday. We did it for sure for Sunday. We did it during the course of the week. And she didn't cook on Sunday. She said, you can go get a steak sandwich, whatever it is, go down the street, whatever it is you need to get, but you're on your own. Or she would say, Gerald, here's how to make hamburger helper or whatever. And that was it.
Hamburger helper.
Saturday was your day,
right.
and to be free to do whatever you want to do. So, but it was, I remember the nights we would sit there and she would go around and my mother did not like silence at the table. She said, oh, nothing happened today. Or she said, did I sleep with each and every one of you? And it was gross, but we got the idea that we had to have a conversation.
Yep.
And certain things that we thought were private were brought up, and it was kind of embarrassing. But
Man.
we learned not to keep secrets. Said, there's no secrets in this house here. Secrets that she didn't know about. But things that happen at school, or things that happen in the neighborhood. Oh, Miss Jones called and said that you did so-and-so. That was brought up, and we were chastised at the table, or we were praised at the table, and that was it. It was a family unit there, and we got to appreciate it, especially at dinner time. I mean, on Sundays or holidays. Everybody came over to my mom's house, and everyone had got fed. She said, if you leave here hungry, it's your fault. There's plenty of food here. So,
there's a reason why. And Jeff, I'm going to put your comment up as well, because I think it's a great comment. He said, the economy has changed, which affects the family makeup.
He's right.
Now, mama ain't at home. She's working. So is dad, probably 2 jobs. The ecosystem has changed as a result. No, I agree with you 1000%, Jeff. However, I do think that we have a lot of mamas at home that still ain't cooking no meals. I think that I'm telling you, we have come to a place. I think that, and I don't want to say it this way, and this is straight talk. I'm giving you straight talk. No, just I don't mean anything by what I'm getting ready to say. There were some liberties. I'll say it this way. There were some liberties that we came into as family where family makeup and the dynamics of the family, gender specific roles no longer meant as much as what they did before. And I see that there have been a lot of women. There are a lot of women who, embrace the new power of freedom and the workplace. Some of it was necessary, and then some of them because they had to, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have an aspiration of doing something great. Oprah Winfrey says, why can't a woman have it all? They can have it all, just not at the same time.
Right.
So when we look at that, we see that one of those things, I have some women that saying like, look, I am not cooking. There was one woman who told me like, listen, I'm not cooking. Before I got married to my husband, I told him I wasn't cooking. I'm not domestic. And I was just sitting there thinking to myself, like, we grew up in a family with men, and those men were taught, listen, this is how you sew, mend a hole in your sock. This is how you cook a meal. Every single man in my family has the ability to take care of themselves.
That's right.
Because I don't care if you get married or whatever, you should never be in a place in life as a man. This was what being a man meant, that you had the ability to take care of yourself.
That's right.
And I saw men, my grandfather made the meanest tea cakes on the planet, but my grandfather would cook just as well as my grandmother could cook. Now, it was her gender specific role, her home role, I should say, that she was the cook, but he could do so as well. So if she wasn't there, we weren't going starving. We're going to starve. And I saw that my father was he wasn't cooking nothing. He was coming home, the food needed to be done. And that was the role he played, but it worked well because he and mom worked different schedules. So there was time for parenting and all of that other stuff. And my mom's on here today. She says, listen, we live in a microwave society. And it's crazy because when we look at what a microwave provides, it directly reflects the kind of community and the kind of societies that we live in. We want help. We want it quick, fast, in a hurry. We want success, quick, fast, in a hurry. I don't want to, how did you get here? Well, I had to work for 20 years. We don't want that. Can we make it faster?
And we don't want to fail.
We don't want to fail. We want to just, everything is a success.
We don't want to learn how to fail.
And so microwaves, they never cook things fully through. Not, most of the time, if it's cooked in the middle, it's overcooked on the outside. If there's nothing like slow cooked meals, when you can begin to season, as my grandmother would say, you got to put some love in it. So when we look at these things, we've got to begin to turn some things around. If there's no community table in a family or in a neighborhood, and what you're saying, Jeff, is right. We must be aware and connected to the times and understanding that the dynamics are changing, that in order to run a household in this current day and age, it takes more money. So most moms are working. They say that, close 76% of our Black families are headed by single parent women. That means that, just because you're not in the home doesn't mean that you get away with not being a father. And I think that the responsibilities of parenting have not changed. Although what we look at and how we operate in a functioning family. And I grew up in a single parent home. I had a stepfather that was an amazing stepfather. I call him Dad because he was a good guy. And I understood that. I never considered myself living in a dysfunctional home. We just simply function differently. And I think it's important that we take those things into account. So that means if there is no table at home, then we've got to begin to create some tables and some spaces for conversation in our community. If we don't have the conversation with them now, if we don't begin to deal with the issues of toxic masculinity now, if we don't begin to tap into their mental psyche now, then we are allowing things to continue to happen in their lives that may eventually boil over. And then we have systems of violence that continue when people are given access, because guns have never killed anybody. It takes a person to kill. They have to pick up a weapon, but they're too pervasive in our community without us having these meaningful conversations. I want to thank you guys for tuning in on today. This evening has been an amazing conversation. Tune in next week. We're going to bring these people in so that we can have conversation with our leaders about what we're going to do as we move forward. I will give you a report at what happened with Mayor Brenda Moore's meeting on gun violence. She is out there trying to tackle the problem. Let's lean in and make this happen. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week with more Straight Talk.
You've been listening to Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen on